Hi, thanks everyone for joining us this evening for the American Association of Geographers annual meeting and their first effort at doing this entire conference virtually. We're very excited to see how it works and how this goes. I'm going to talk with you this evening about the Secondary Cities Spatial Stories of Participatory Mapping. This is a project that has been facilitated by the Office of the Geographer. It's been managed and supported by the American Association of Geographers and really been partially implemented by the Geospatial Centroid at Colorado State University. What is this project about and what are we going to be talking about this evening? Well, we're looking at mapping urban areas, and the focus is really looking at rapidly growing urban areas, exploring those places that are under-examined, have problems with accessing food, water, and energy, and most importantly for our discussion tonight, lack geospatial data for mapping and planning. Our emphasis is on secondary cities, and secondary cities are those places that are often provincial capitals. They're hubs of commerce and governance, but they are not the megacities that we usually focus on. What do we mean when we're talking about secondary cities within the context of the Secondary Cities Initiative? Laura gave us a little bit of background in the introduction here. This has been a 5-year initiative that is a global project, and it spans 16 different countries in many different places around the world, as you can see from this particular map here. The Secondary Cities is built on partnerships, on how we can develop and facilitate sustainable partnerships. So starting with the US State Department, we conducted outreach with many different embassies around the world that really know best what's going on in the countries in which they are doing their work. They were able to help us identify a local champion that was usually at one of the universities in the cities that we were working in. We partnered and just had discussions with national and regional governments to consider what are the key things that are going on in their cities, what really needs to be the emphasis of these projects. And then talking most specifically with the city governments that really know about the local resources on the ground and what are the critical issues that are occurring there. We were able to also facilitate some partnerships with different software companies. In particular, Esri was key to some of our partnerships. But also open source tools and technology were very important to this project. And then we partnered also with a number of different NGOs, EcoCity Builders that is based out of Oakland, Kathmandu Living Labs that is in Nepal. And these all were partnerships that were facilitated to support a secondary cities project that operated from about 1 to 2 years. We've worked now to try to facilitate the continuance of these projects through a series of networks. I'll talk about that in just a moment. The Secondary Cities Initiative focuses on human geography themes, and specifically our aim for the initiative is to look at emergency preparedness, human security, and resiliency. And across our projects, we realized that we needed to address common data layers that help us be able to do analysis to identify access to resources, access to services during times of disaster. And so each of our projects, while they focused on a particular aspect of their city issues, also collected these data in their different cities. The outcome of this project has to do with looking at being able to share data, looking at curriculum development, and identifying best practices. So in terms of technology development, it was very important for us to understand about access to data and being able to share, being able to identify open source tools and consider how interoperability works or doesn't work between the different platforms we were using and the different kinds of tools we selected. We also focused on consolidating international human geography standards. So all of our teams, all of our project partners were given a workshop on participatory mapping ethics, on developing and doing metadata standards and following the same data protocols. Most important of all, the project has facilitated building networks that we hope will be for long-term future participation in these kinds of projects. So a real challenge was working across cultures and languages, but an outcome of the project has been some internships that have been developed with local governments where some of the students at the universities who have been out collecting data are now suddenly being able to have an internship that could lead to a particular job within their city government. We think this is a very exciting outcome. So where we post all of our data is on something called the Secondary Cities GeoNode. This is where all of our cities we have put all of their data here, and you can see all the different photos that identify our different partner cities. In the Secondary Cities GeoNode, there's a couple of different things here that are really important. One is we have posted not only all the data, but you can see this through an interactive map through setting a filter and doing a search on, for example, in this one, Kharkiv. We've posted the data that has to do with boundaries, with buildings, with parcels, and we've shared not only the data that our partners have collected, but also some existing data to be able to say, put it in a broader context. We also have posted on the 2C GeoNode are all the documents that support the different projects. Each project have created their own set of documentation with respect to training materials or materials that describe something about what they have done out in the field. And the information that's available here is not only in English, but is also provided in the local language that may be French or Spanish or even Ukrainian. So all of our different projects have sort of organically developed into 3 different regional hubs. We have the Secondary Cities Asia, we have Africa, and we have Latin America. And as you can see from this list, there's a different focus for each of the projects, but there's a lot of commonality. The water drops on this indicate that many of our projects have issues with water and water supply. And so this really helped us also determine what are the common data layers we need, what are the common issues, and how can our teams work across this network to share experiences. So we hosted 3 different technical exchanges, and we're going to talk about those different technical exchanges to you. And so now I'm going to pass this off to Amanda to talk to you about our first technical exchange.
Thanks, Melinda. Across the cities in our regional hubs, we see a lot of similar challenges. To strengthen the regional network and to share lessons learned and best practices, the 2C initiative hosted a series of regional technical exchanges. Our most recent technical exchange took place in Quito, Ecuador. The majority of 2C participants are highly skilled and motivated students who have a tremendous amount of knowledge to share. And I want to share with you the types of challenges and mapping taking place in our Latin American 2C cities that we learned about during our technical exchange. So here are our cities that are in our Latin American hub. We have 6 cities that belong to that hub. So first, looking at Tijuana. Tijuana is a border city that has 1.6 million people. A combination of insufficient waste management and ineffective river flood mitigation has resulted in widespread hazardous conditions. Trash is often disposed of in the river, blocking storm and sewer infrastructure and resulting in more severe flooding and hazardous conditions for the many people living in the floodplain. The 2C Tijuana team used drones and satellite imagery to map the floodplain and identify trash disposal sites along the river. This data is vital to developing more effective trash collection and to understand what people are at risk from flooding. Also allows us to estimate and to prioritize trash cleanup efforts. Focusing next on Santiago, Dominican Republic. The 2C Santiago team mapped a variety of social and demographic variables from neighborhoods with high risk for flooding. They assessed the condition of these neighborhoods and conducted household surveys. This survey created fine-scale resolution geospatial data on household building material, income level, ethnicity, the age structure of household members, education levels, and employment. When combining this fine-scale social data with environmental hazards, we can quantify who's at risk, to what degree they experience this risk, and it helps the city to better plan for future natural disasters. This data also importantly gives a voice to these disparaged individuals to say, yes, I am here, and these are the conditions that I live in. Esmeraldas is a rapidly growing coastal city whose economy is mainly driven by natural resource extraction. Esmeraldas has a high poverty and crime rate and is susceptible to man-made and natural disasters. The 2C Esmeraldas team collected geospatial data on many of these hazards, like the flood zone, trash dumping sites, and areas at risk for landslide. They mapped the location of point source pollution across the city and monitored the pollution levels at these sites. This information helps to hold polluters accountable and provides the basis for remediation strategies. Santa Fe experiences many of the same challenges as our other 2C Latin American cities. They have an annual population growth rate of 3%, which has resulted in the development of many informal settlements. 24% of these informal settlements are within the flood zone. Our 2C Santa Fe partners, in conjunction with the city, mapped out neighborhoods with high flooding risk and identified less risky areas for resettlement to reduce vulnerability and improve health prospects for the city. Now looking at 2C Medellin, Colombia. The city of Medellin is a valley surrounded by steep mountains. The metropolitan area of Medellin is made up of 9 other small cities and has a combined population of 3.9 million people. We conducted a change detection analysis to assess the progression of built-up areas in Medellin and discovered that the city was really already fully built out by 1990. In conjunction with the local government, we discovered that new growth was occurring on steep slopes, mainly as informal settlements. The recent growth in the north is actually outside of city limits, but is creating so much erosion from living on these steep slopes that it's degrading the water quality of the river that runs through Medellin, demonstrating the importance of intra-city collaboration and planning. Similar to the story in Medellin, Cusco, Peru was fully built out in their river Raleigh. By overlaying the built-up change detection with remotely sensed imagery and Google Street View photographs allows for visual inspection of new developments. You can extract environmental parameters from these areas to gain a better understanding of how people are living and the risks that they're exposed to. New growth is also occurring on steep slopes with little ground cover, putting the people who live there at risk for landslides. I'm now going to go ahead and send it back off to Melinda.
Thanks, Amanda. We had a technical exchange in Accra, Ghana in July of last year, and we had all of our partners attend that particular technical exchange. As you can see, this particular set of partners that span the African continent from east to west, and including Mozambique and Cameroon, Nigeria, Guinea, and Ethiopia. Our partner in Port Harcourt focused on vulnerable populations and access to infrastructure. This was one of the cities that had very little data to start with. And so for them to actually start to collect these kinds of data about emergency shelters, healthcare, security services was quite a contribution to the city. We now want to take a look at issues that have to do with energy and how energy is accessed across the city. In Pemba, Mozambique, we also partnered with them, and it's very interesting there because right after our partnership was when we had the 2 cyclones hit the coast of Mozambique. And so trying to really identify how helpful can these data be for our partners here, and were we able to utilize our partnership in any way to share with them how we can develop solutions for emergency preparedness. There had been a number of data sets that had been collected previously in working with USAID, but on top of this, our partner project was able to collect a lot of different kinds of data linking to the human geography themes that we wanted to facilitate in this particular region. And so you can see they were able to collect all of these data, and some of this were helpful for looking at disaster preparedness, but there still is quite a long way to go in Mozambique. Our Bokeh Kamsar project is really interesting because what we have going on in Bokeh, it has to do with the development of a corridor city that goes along a major highway there all the way down to a small port that's located on the coast. And there was, again, no data there or no base map that existed at all. And so developing a partnership with the university there and working with a local NGO and building on the platform using OpenStreetMap, a lot of data was started to be collected, organized, and begin to demonstrate how we could create a base map for this and look at issues of access to services. In Douala, Cameroon, the emphasis there was mapping emergency preparedness and flooding. And so looking at this, we started to be able to think about how might we start to model some of the information that we have, and using high resolution satellite imagery and putting together some scenarios. What if the sea level rose 1 meter? What if it rose 5 meters? What if it rose 10 meters? And then being able to say, where are all the schools? And if the schools are in these vulnerable zones, does Douala need to think about having a plan for moving them? Our partner in Cameroon is just really excellent, and there's just a lot of other work he's been doing. They've been doing in partnership with our team there in terms of developing a mobile app to look for ways to collect data during an emergency. I'm going to go ahead and pass this back to Amanda to talk about McKelly.
Thanks, Melinda. McKelly is sort of an exceptional secondary city because rather than experiencing widespread flooding, water there is in extremely short supply. The city is 100% reliant on groundwater for its drinking and household water source, but the groundwater levels are thought to be rapidly depleting. Wells dug in the 90s have not been remeasured, and so it's unclear how much water is left from this source. The 2C McKelly team mapped the location of wells throughout the city and measured water levels and water quality. They tallied the number of people reliant on each well and the number of women on each water council to assess gender roles in water management. They found that many wells were non-functional, that there's a lack of women making decisions for water management, and that the yield has significantly decreased since wells were dug. This information is invaluable for assessing water needs in the city and can help decision makers plan for better water management. I just want to take a second here to show you some of the results that we got from this analysis. So they mapped out all of the different wells across the city, and what they found is that a lot of the shallow wells in the northwestern portion of the city are non-functional, but there's a lot of people living there, so how do we meet that need? I'll now kick it back off to Melinda.
Last technical exchange took place in Kathmandu, Nepal. What was interesting about this particular technical exchange is this is where we have established a Secondary Cities Asia hub. And our leader there, Nama, is the director of Kathmandu Living Labs. And we're seeking ways where he might be able to facilitate having additional projects that go on in this particular area due to his expertise. And so at that particular technical exchange, we had not only our partners attended, but also representatives from the Philippines, from Vietnam, from Cambodia, and Laos, and Pakistan, who also came and were able to see what the Secondary City Initiative is and see this kind of data that's being collected and how it might be useful. One of our projects is in Darkhan, Mongolia. This is about 2 hours north of Ulaanbaatar, and their aim was to look at waste management. They had huge problems with waste management, but they did have a bit of data already. So they had good base maps that we could work from, and then we partnered with the university there, who went out and decided, okay, where are we going to start to collect these data? And so collecting things that had to do with illegal waste, where are the legal waste dumps, looking at recycling centers, and some of these kinds of activities. Our project in Indore, India was facilitated and run by Nama through Kathmandu Living Labs, and the focus for Indore was looking at health services. So all across the city, they collected these different types of data layers along with other services that they did find. but they like things that had to do with clinics, with hospitals, with pharmacies, things that are so critical today when we're looking at the situation we're in and trying to understand where the services are located across the city, who has access to them, and where are places that have gaps in terms of providing these kinds of services. Our project in Denpasar, Indonesia had also a very strong emphasis on waste management, particularly ocean waste management. We had a team there that went throughout the entire city of Denpasar and made maps of all the different collection points for trash, identification of all the illegal dumps, where are all the sanitary landfills, all of these kinds of things they collected these data on. And what they also developed was a handheld app on a smartphone to be able to go around and locate different waste management facilities and be able to add this and track this over time. I'm going to pass this back to Amanda now.
Thanks, Melinda. Focusing on Pokhara, Nepal. Nepal is one of the poorest countries in the world and prone to natural disasters. Nepal has a long history of inadequate and at times non-existent quality education. Our 2C Pokhara partners, led by Kathmandu Living Labs, collected geospatial data on a variety of social, health, food, and educational variables. This wealth of data was used as the basis for making a map book, which was widely distributed throughout the city. The 2C CSU team evaluated the data that was collected to determine if there were spatial inequalities in access to these resources. So we asked a few questions. We wanted to know if people living in densely populated areas had to travel long or short distances to services. We wanted to know how many people lived relatively far away from services and how large service areas were and what percentage of the population are served by these areas. And here is a snapshot of our results. So what we found is that the educational category had the smallest number of available services and that they really were not well distributed across the landscape. They were pretty centralized to the center of the city. However, there was a significantly higher population density living closer to schools rather than far away. Therefore, it's most likely meeting the most need, but perhaps leaving more rural communities with significant barriers to accessing education. One interesting aspect of Pokhara is that the municipal boundary regularly expands to include annexed territories. Doing an analysis such as ours can help the city better plan for new annexations by better understanding how services are spatially distributed and understanding how this intersects with the population of Pokhara. The results from this work were recently accepted for publication, and we plan on following the same methodology that we developed to assess service distribution throughout the rest of our 2C cities. I will now talk to you about our 2C Kharkiv partners. Kharkiv is a city of over 1.4 million people. And in 1995, a major flood polluted their water supply, and residents were asked to go stay with relatives in the countryside for a few weeks. Many people did not have this option, so they stayed and accessed water from local groundwater-fed urban springs. The 2C Kharkiv partners saw the value in mapping these locations. So they mapped water quality parameters and the number of daily visitors. They made this information available in a web app so that locals can easily know the status of springs. And most recently, we collaborated with our 2C Kharkiv partners to develop a fine-scale resolution population density map that we overlaid with the spring data, and found that if water is collected from springs over 24 hours, 70% of the minimum drinking water requirements for Kharkiv can be met from these urban spring water sources. We also found that highly populated areas overlapped well with springs producing the most water. So the results from this work have recently been summarized and submitted for publication. I'm now going to give it back to Melinda.
Well, thanks so much for joining us this evening. We're really at a stage with the Secondary City Initiative to think about what are next steps. We're trying to figure out ways to facilitate and maintain this network and identify alternative ways to coordinate through identifying grants and funding mechanisms that can really continue to build on what we've put in place here. Some of our projects have been developing a Youth Mappers chapter. We plan to host a number of webinars to keep people talking together. And most importantly is really looking at this slide where all these young people around the world are working on developing geospatial skills and be able to map their city. So we have representation here from Nigeria, from Nepal, from Guinea, from Ukraine, Argentina, Colombia, and Indonesia. We've been so excited to be able to do this project and excited to share it with you this evening. And now we can open it up for questions. Thank you so much.